I'll just explain who I am, why that's coming up. My name's Alastair Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of Nuggets. Nuggets is all about taking back control of your data. And my question is, do you believe personal information should be kept by the person or government, brands, businesses, or etc.? And that's either personally held or government brands. Cool. Sort of expected. Unfortunately, at the moment, probably most of it is held by everyone else but us, but we're hoping to make inroads into that with Nuggets. So Nuggets actually came about from a personal experience of having my personal information and paying information used fraudulently online, and the hassle that it took to get back that information, and then suddenly realising how many locations I had to update with my new card information and my personal information, and realising that I'd left it around all over the internet. We use the analogy, you wouldn't go and write down your credit card details and your mother's maiden name and your first pet's name on a post-it note and leave it in every shop on the high street you go to. But in a digital sense, we do that all over the internet, and you're trusting all these people to look after that information. So, where am I pointing to? Which way around is it going? Is it just the arrows on the left?
Yeah, arrows on the left and right. It's not doing it.
Oh, it's doing it on there, but it's not doing it on there.
Oh, is it frozen? Okay.
Yeah, try again. Okay. So it's all about all the online services that we have today, and all of us have lots of those. And what's held in those online services? Credit card details, as I said, mother's maiden name, first pet's name, email addresses and such like. But there's a big problem with having that information out there, in that currently there's a lot of breaches of personal data, and more recently we saw Facebook with a lot of information they've been handing out quite easily, which has affected them. The 145 million one is actually Equifax, meant to be custodians of our personal information for 7 years at least. Not done a very good job of that, decided to distribute it to the world. No thank you for that. And then the classics of Yahoo and such like. But this you can see as a problem, to see if you're part of the problem already. I am. This is a database that's trawled off the dark web, and there's over 5 billion records in it. And criminals are now doing a scam at the moment, which is actually quite clever. They're going into this, seeing what your old password was, hoping that you haven't changed it, and then send you an email saying, I've got your password, give me some Bitcoin. And if you haven't changed it, you should probably worry. If you have, you obviously realise that it's a scam, but it's quite unnerving in terms of that. So, if you can see recently from all the data breaches that have been recorded over here, this is up to the end of 2017. I did try and update it for 2018, but it still says 2017 at the top, so they need to update the code on it. But it gives you an example of the amount of, that it's endemic in terms of how many data breaches are. And if you look back in time, back to 2004, over that time there's been quite a lot of data breaches, but AOL, bless them, started off with 92 million, a good quota to get us going. But it wasn't really a big problem back in 2004, whereas now it's a massive problem on a daily basis globally. Even in China, which you don't get to know that much about privacy, and privacy as an individual is a different perception to business, they've got a very big problem with businesses being breached, and they don't want that happening. And so globally, obviously GDPR and such like addressing that. So what is Nuggets? Nuggets is an e-commerce payments and ID platform. It stores your personal and payment data securely in the blockchain, so you never have to share it with anyone, not even Nuggets. Now that's very important, especially in this environment. The reason why we're using blockchain is the inherent ability to have zero knowledge storage. That being that there's no admin access, there's no root level access. If you store your data on AWS, either someone at that brand can get into that root level, or if not them, AWS can get into it up to root level for you. There is workarounds, but it's quite difficult to do it. There is regulatory zero knowledge solutions in Switzerland, but not exactly a global solution. So we actually use the principle of the blockchain having a public and private key, and only the private key holder can have access to that block of information. And that's what we effectively do. We componentize all the information for the individual. We as Nuggets have no access to it. You have the key, only you have access as the individual. Now what that means is no more data breaches because companies don't have to store your data. Now at first you think that all businesses love our data, and we do to an extent, but if you work in the retail sector, we know some very large brands who come in to work on a daily basis going, have we been breached today? And CEOs' heads are rolling, fines are getting immense, and it's ruining companies around the world. So actually, a lot of businesses now are saying, if we don't have to keep it and we don't need it, I don't want to hold it, you keep hold of it, that's fine. So it works quite well for them. Now, currently, how it materialises for Nuggets is we have login, all biometric. We have no username and password at any point because we see that as a root level problem to access. Now, if you even look at Apple Pay, it's basically your Apple ID that is that access. If you get a stolen Apple ID and a credit card details off the dark web that hasn't been reported fraudulently, you can build a nice Apple Pay account and go and get yourself a nice laptop. So we worked around that as well, and also proving identity. Also, we don't use email or SMS verification. You've probably seen recently Reddit got breached because the two-factor authentication by sending SMS to the phones numbers are getting taken over. In the crypto community, it's a big problem. It's getting more and more of a problem on a daily basis. So we also pay securely without storing or sharing your data. We have our own token. We can work with existing EMV tokens. This is what Apple Pay use, what Android Pay use, even Union Pay use it in China. And this is an existing token representation and reference that can be used for a payment instead of sending your card details. You can also work with proprietary payment gateways as well. Now, the other key thing, this also comes from personal experience. Every week my bank rings me up to tell me that someone's bought £10,000 worth of cigarettes and alcohol somewhere where I don't live, and can you demonstrate whether this is you or not? And at this point they start asking me for my mother's maiden name, my first pet's name, my different initials from my password. But I say, well, are you really my bank? Oh, I can't tell you that until you've proved what your pet's name is and what your mother's maiden name is. So I say, I'm not going to have this conversation then because you may be fishing for information. So what we've also done as Nuggets is made the potential of a digital identity where customer services can press a button that is associated with that digital identity, and it pings a user on the other end who can verify their identity by biometrics from their own phone to do that, which helps for you to know that it is your bank and the bank to know that they're talking to the right person as well. So the fundamental change that we see is no more storing personal data in honeypot silos, and the person, the individual, owns and controls it within their own realm. That's not to say that databases in a centralised sense are going to disappear forever. They have certain relevance in certain areas and in certain interactions, as we've seen in other instances. But what we're basically saying is personal information should be held with a person wherever possible. If it then goes outside that, then there's other protocols and systems like IOTA that can help to look after that, and beyond that, decentralized identity foundation and DIDs and things like that. So payment privacy and security. And this is an example of the early product. It's been evolved beyond that. You sign up with your biometrics. This writes private key associated to that biometric. We then add a photo ID, and we verify that with your biometrics against that photo ID to prove that it is you with that ID, and then a personal payment card, and we correlate that to give us a basic cornerstone of trust. This then enables you to then go out there and transact and interact, log in, and so forth. So then after that, you can log in. Now, when we log in, we don't pass any information. It's just a digital identity. There's a lot of systems out there currently that pass your email or your phone number or other personal information. We only pass the digital identity as a reference at that point. You can, as a user, pass more information. It's your information at the end of the day, but we advise you that that may be happening. You can also pay. Obviously, you can do that with one click because effectively we can log you in and pay at the same time. And also when you're interacting with customer services, we're able to have it where that digital identity can be associated to the interaction, and then that pings you on your phone at the other end, and you can verify that with your biometrics. So it always comes back to the biometric source and the identity associated to the device. Obviously that makes you very happy. So 4 points of customer interaction authorised with Nuggets. We've got the login, the e-commerce service, customer service, and we can also do the delivery. As you know, nowadays there's a lot of blockchain and logistics exercises where they're going from field to front door, and we can associate that digital identity to that journey and along that journey, so that when that courier turns up, they can ping that digital identity and you can verify that you're that person to receive that £1,000 phone or that other expensive item that's been delivered to you. And you can also prove, obviously, whether the courier's been or not. Now, my favourite thing and the strength of using blockchain in this scenario is when you do a transaction, we put a transparent flag on the network. We don't say how much it was, what it was, and the other activity, but we say that basically it was seen as a good transaction. The merchant was happy, the delivery was good, and so forth, the payment went through. Now, over time, when you do more and more transactions, you build up a trust profile, a proof of good actor on the network, a trustless network. And this is very powerful because in future, this means that when you get off a plane in a foreign country, unlike the current risk assessments that happen when you do e-commerce, and they stop your card working, you will be pre-proven as a good digital identity that can do that transaction, which is very powerful. Maybe in future you could go and buy a large value item without getting a credit reference, and since Equifax have already caught that one up, it'd be useful if that can happen. Now, everyone says, well, why are you interested in this commercially? Well, global e-commerce sales are forecast 3.4 trillion. Half of that is actually China at the moment. We've spent a lot of time recently, and one of our first partners is also in China. It's interesting in China because privacy on a personal level is not perceived in the same way as it is in the West, but privacy of people's information within businesses is, which is very important. So global mobile commerce sales are forecast at 693 billion in 2019, and about 3/4 of that, again, is in China at the moment. They're very mobile centric. You can't get out of the smallest cab in China without having a QR code experience and trying to pay. It's very difficult to pay with cash, as you'll know if you haven't got a Union Pay card, which is difficult for anyone outside of China. So at Nuggets, we see it as a perfect storm and an ideal opportunity. Data security is in a critical state, and we can see that on a daily basis if you get an email update on data breaches. Fraudulent chargebacks. 42% of retail fraud is fraudulent chargebacks. And card and identity fraud in the US is seen as 16 billion, but 6 times bigger than that is false positives. That's when your risk assessment on your card says you're not good today, but your money is good. Online's increasing every 5 years, and regulations are tougher with GDPR and FTC. We've all got biometrics on all our devices, and it's frictionless, and the technology allows us to do that. We've been very lucky to work with the Financial Conduct Authority, proving this out with customers and that, to validate it in real time. And as I mentioned more recently, we've tied up with QFPay, who deals with all the merchant services for Alipay and WeChat Pay. And obviously that's an enormous audience. I think WeChat Pay's got 800 million users, and since there's 800 million people online in China, that's good coverage, I'd say. And basically, as a commercial operation, how do we make money out of this? It's free to the user, but we charge transaction to the retailer. And out of that transaction, we have a small percentage written in a smart contract that goes to charity as well, either specified by the user or the retailer, or whichever is chosen at that point. And that basically is Nuggets.